Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Good morning for those of you who are joining us from Europe. Good afternoon from in the Middle East and in Asia. This is the third webinar organized by Confluence Consultants this year. Some of you have already joined us before, so the idea, you understood, is for us to try and anticipate some of the developments for 2024, some of the major themes, some of the key themes that we believe corporates, but also people who observe global geopolitical developments should be looking at carefully. The first webinar was a very generic one where we tried to identify what we call black swans, white elephants, and gray rhinos. So those events that we don't know could be happening, those events that we know could be happening, but that we're not prepared for. Then we moved on to a very specific and very Middle East focused event, where we had Professor Esra Albayrakoglu from Bahçeşehir University in Istanbul guide us through some of the major themes in terms of geopolitical risk to watch out for in the Middle East. And today we would change the topics that we cover completely, and we're going full tech. We want to be looking at one specific industrial and technological sector, and that is artificial intelligence. Needless to say, artificial intelligence is becoming central not only in the technological developments, but also in world geopolitics. And for this, we are very honored to welcome Stanley Quifan Chen, who's joining us from southern China. Stanley is a globetrotter, so we're happy to be able to catch him while he's actually staying in one place more than 48 hours. So thank you, Stanley, for that. Stanley is going to be helping us understand developments in artificial intelligence, but also understand the geopolitics of artificial intelligence. We're going to be discussing with him issues of governance, and we're going to try and open up to some more philosophical and why not some spiritual consideration on artificial intelligence. So I'm going to go through, for everybody's benefit, through the biography of Stanley. Stanley is an award-winning author and a creative producer and curator. He's first and foremost, and this is why we're so happy to have with us today, he's a science fiction writer. He wrote many award-winning science fiction novels. I'm going to name a few. It's not an exhaustive list. Waste Tide, which made a lot of noise when it came out, which was Stanley's first science fiction novel. He wrote Future Disease, The Algorithms of Life. There is one book that I'm going to use quite a lot, and I'm going to quote from it quite often, that he co-wrote with his ex-colleague from Google China, Kai-Fu Lee, and the book is called AI 2041, 10 Visions for Our Future. So Stanley has been writing on artificial intelligence themed science fiction since about the mid-2010s, if I'm not wrong. Prior to that, Stanley worked at Baidu and at Google China. He graduated from Peking University and from the University of Hong Kong and Tsinghua University in China. And Stanley is kind enough to join us today. He's a globetrotter, as I said. He gives a lot of conferences worldwide. He's also a research fellow in different research centers. He's an Asia 21 Next Generation Fellow at the Asia Society in Hong Kong. He's a research fellow at the Berggruen Institute in Los Angeles. And also he was a research scholar at the Yale Macmillan Center. So I'm going to stop here for the biography because I could be going longer and longer listing all the prizes that you won, Stanley. But I think people will be discovering this when they start reading your books. I want to say as well that for this discussion today, and this is the first time we do this, and we are very honored to welcome him, we are enlisting the help of Pranav Sharma. Pranav is going to be joining us in this discussion and asking questions along with us to Stanley. Pranav is based in Dubai. He's the founding partner of the Woodstock Fund and Agna, which is a platform that focuses on tech investment. Pranav has a very keen interest in artificial intelligence, but also in climate tech, in defense, startup technologies. And he will be joining us with his own engineer background and tech background. He'll be joining us to ask questions to Stanley. And of course, we will be opening the floor to a Q&A session at the end. I'm going to start, before we start diving into the questions, Stanley, I would like to start by actually reading from your own introduction to this book, AI 2041, that you co-wrote with Kai Foley. In the second page of your introduction, and by the way, I love the title of your introduction, How Can We Learn to Stop Worrying and Embrace the Future with Imagination? So it tells us that Stanley is a man of hope. You tell us, and I quote, "The truth as it has been revealed in stories ranging from the Chinese folk tale of Yan Shi, the mechanic who created a humanoid, to Telos, the bronze automaton in Greek mythology. The truth is that human search for artificial intelligence has persisted throughout world history, long before computer science existed as a field or the term AI entered the lexicon. From the past era to the present day, the unstoppable force of AI has been revolutionizing every dimension of human civilization, and it will continue to do so." And then you continue in the next paragraph, "While some may scapegoat science fiction, blaming it for people's narrow and often negative view of AI, that's only part of the story. Science fiction has the capacity to serve as a warning, but speculative storytelling also has a unique ability to transcend time-space limitations, connect technology and humanities, blur the boundary between fiction and reality, and spark empathy and deep thinking within its reader. Historian and best-selling author Yuval Noah Harari has called science fiction the most important artistic genre of our time." So Stanley, with this introduction, we would like, first of all, to tell us and share with the audience, what took you to science fiction writing? Why did you go into science fiction writing? And within science fiction writing, what made you focus on the artificial intelligence theme? I mean, most of your novels are about artificial intelligence, this connection between the human and the machine. What drove you to this?
Thank you so much, Nicolas, for having me to Confluence. And yeah, this is a very often asked question. And yeah, people always have this kind of like speculation that because I used to work for Google and Baidu for this tech companies, so this is what drove me to become a science fiction writer, but basically it's the other way around. So I started to read and watch all of those sci-fi classics since I think in the kindergarten. So basically Jules Verne was one of my favorite authors back in the day. So France works and also like Arthur C. Clarke, Heinlein, Asimov, like I, Robot, basically one of my favorite. And also 2001 Space Odyssey was one of my most watched movie. Like I watch it every other year. So I rewatch it many, many times because every time I find something new, something freshy, like something reflective to make me think deeper into the thing, like AI, like intelligence, like science fiction. So I started to write my own stories since 16 and got published. And I was very lucky. And I start to, actually my first story was about AI maybe. So it's like a Star Wars-ish space opera. And why I'm so obsessed with AI as a topic, I think because as you just read from the book, this is some imagination way back into the day when we were like pre-modern, even like caveman time. We always imagine that we can create something like something intelligent, but other than human form. So this is something we always have this kind of tension between us, like human beings, with some different kind of intelligence. So we have this kind of like robots, we have like Frankenstein's monster, we have aliens. Right now we have AI. So it's basically the otherness, the fear and the favor, this kind of binary attitude is always there. It's deeply embedded in our human nature. So I think this is why I try to dig deeper, because right now it's becoming reality, right? So basically it's happening even faster than we could ever imagine. So I think is right now I'm always joking, I'm writing realistic, I'm writing really realism literature, not science fiction, because what I'm writing maybe will become true, like maybe just the day after tomorrow. So think about OpenAI. So when we published this book in 2021, we never think of like things like ChatGPT can be launched like in the next year. So basically change everything. So this is so-called the ChatGPT moment. And me and Dr. Lee, we agree that we're being too conservative on predicting the future. So I'm quite fascinating that still some people want to read this book, and this is the latest paperback just coming out this March. And of course, a lot of like predictions, a lot of imagination, a lot of stories in this book might not taking 20 years to become real. Maybe just another 5 to 10 years, maybe even sooner. So this is how fascinating that when we think about the technology revolutionize everything, but meanwhile we know so little of how we get here and how we can understand ourselves through this kind of technology and how deeply it interacts with us and it's changing us basically. So I think this is not only something about science and technology, it's more importantly, it's about our being, our existence. So I think this is some universal question that everyone have to think carefully through the rest of your life. So this is, I think we are gonna live through this time like we're coexist with machine or some other kind of intelligence, basically. So I think, yeah, so this is something only science fiction can do back in the day or even at the present time. So it across all these boundaries. So yeah, I'm very lucky to find my interest at a very young age, and I'm fully committed to it. And now I'm here talking to all of you.
Awesome. Thanks, Stanley. And I'm very happy to hear that the French writer Jules Verne was a big inspiration for you. I mean, he's one of the forefathers of science fiction, as everybody knows. I'm quite fascinated by what you say, and it brings like it brings back one major question. The audience should know that Stanley and I first met about a month ago. We had a very fascinating lunch together in Paris when Stanley was visiting on a series of conferences and book roadshow. And it reminds me one of the things that we discussed during this lunch. My question being, is it science fiction following tech, or is it tech following science fiction? And in many aspects, it's starting to look like sometimes technological developments are actually following science fiction. It looks like those tech guys are reading your books and all the other sci-fi books, and they're saying, why not? Let's try, let's give it a shot.
Yeah, if you look back to the history of science and technology, you can find a lot of good examples. For example, modern submarine, for example, the mobile phone, for example, the satellite and all this tablet PC, right? So basically a lot of like inventors and entrepreneurs, maybe engineers, they got a lot of inspiration from reading science fiction or watching sci-fi movies. But I have to say this is basically like yin and yang. We actually absorb more like knowledge and inspiration from what tech people do in the industry. And we read a lot of papers in the lab, like from the universities, from the scholars. Basically, maybe many of those didn't turn into real application for many reasons, but they might turn into stories because we love crazy ideas, and and sometimes scientists that are even more crazier than we do. So I think this is kind of like yin and yang. So we are transforming each other, we're becoming each other, we're supporting each other. And this is some kind of like the ecosystem, how all these ideas can like inspiring each other. So this is a very healthy and sustainable ecosystem. That means your ideas and your thoughts can exchange and flow in a very healthy manner. So because we don't have maybe a certain society, we allow ideas to transfer and exchange and or trading in that way. But at certain society, they are very, separate in a very, vigor like manner. So this is fictional, this is reality. So they don't have the chance to exchange or inspiring each other. So that's not good. So in my opinion, so we need to work together. Like me, I work with Dr. Lee. So he's the expert, he's doing the thing in the industry. And now I'm working with some major scientists in China who are working on nanotechnology. So she really want me to, popularize some of their research and put them into storytelling and to, spreading the message and information to the society or even younger generation. So to evoke their curiosity and passion about the future, about the technology. So I think this is really important. Like we have this kind of mechanism that allows people from different disciplinary, from different area, we can exchange and we can have this kind of brainstorming and we can collaborate together and to reshape the mindset of the people. So this is what I believe in.
That's fascinating. I mean, how what you're describing as how science fiction can reinforce technological development and build narratives around it is quite fascinating. This is actually taking us to a question that Pranav and I would like to address with you, which is technological developments per se, and what you see are the technological developments that are that we're gonna be witnessing in the next few years. Again, I'm going back to the book itself, AI 2041. In the introduction, you remind us of Amara's law, and you remind us that Amara said, we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. How would you say that this particularly applies to AI? And could you give us examples of overestimation of technological developments and some other long-term developments that people are overlooking completely?
Yeah, like AI is a perfect example for Amara's law. For example, Alan Turing's paper, like back in the 1940s, can machine think, right? A thinking machine. And thinking about 1956 in Dartmouth, when the term artificial intelligence was first invented, and people think, oh, maybe this took 5 to 8 years to have all this team like military DARPA in the lab. They can build up some machine can think as human, but nothing really happened. Like there are several ups and downs according to many reasons, but until like in the 90s, people have this kind of neural network or so-called deep learning methodology was invented. Basically, we learn a lot from how human brain, how our neural system function, and we try to, mimicking the nature. And we came up with this engineering manifestation to build up this super sophisticated and complex system. And basically, this is how it gonna evolve in this way. It's not always like this. It's not always linear and accelerating like this, but it's going up and down and maybe sometimes recurring to backward. And this is very fascinating. It always reminds me of biology, right? Because we think about like species like evolve in a non-linear manner. So, but people will put it in different kind of like sequence. We think we try to phrase it in a linear way, but actually it's not happened like that. So I think right now we're working very hard to understand what is the fundamental mechanism beneath LLM, because we all like build up everything upon this transformer infrastructure and think about the latest Sora. So they again, it's an engineering success, right? So basically, all this know-how is built up upon this kind of massive data training and unlimited like computation powers. It's called scaling law, right? So without all of those, resources and advantage of know-how, so OpenAI couldn't achieve this. So, but what is ultimate? What is underneath everything? So basically, it's a black box. It's a mysterious. So I think this is what reminds us we it's not us, it's not artificial intelligence, it's emergence intelligence. So basically, we're just using our engineering skill to build up the thing, but we didn't design it. We didn't expect something emerge from this large language model. So this is my point, that it is still, we human beings, we're still at the very beginning of understanding what is intelligence and how can we get there, like get it closer to AGI, or even, I don't know, AGI is the correct appropriate term to describe the thing, right? So because human, we're AGI, but can you call that a silicon-based intelligence is an AGI? I don't know. So still, I think this is highly skeptical, that because we human beings, we intended to think everything from our own perspective. This is unavoidable. We're a human-centric species, right? So I think it's so incredible that right now we have some non-human intelligence which is compatible to collaborate, to interact, to deeply engage in our human social activities in a massive scale. So I think we are getting into this kind of symbiosis era of human machine, symbiosis. And this is profoundly reshaping everything, but we still didn't see it in that way because we just see the story from our perspective. You didn't see from the machine's perspective. You didn't see the story from the rest of the world, like other species or even the environment itself. So I think still the large language model is so impressive, but I think it's getting more magnificent in the near future. Maybe this year. I think this year a lot of things, a lot of milestones will be achieved, will be accomplished. So we're just waiting for that moment, like the magic moment, like the Hispanic moment to happen. Yeah, it's coming to us.
Pranav, I think you wanted to jump in on this.
First of all, this is phenomenal. I can just keep on listening to this forever. And this is, both Nicolas and Stan, you have done a great job in terms of, pulling me into this conversation. So there's one question I, had based upon what you shared, Stanley. So Rocco Basilisk, there was a thought experiment which was done, quite a few years back. And it's sort of, created a paradigm in which, people, if AI does become sentient, then people who contributed towards AI and AI lands up creating a virtual reality of its own, then AI would know that these are the people who contributed towards the advancement of AI. So it was a very interesting thought experiment, and there are findings that some people actually felt depressed, negative, etc. That what if they're not contributing, and how do they know they are contributing or not? So it was a very interesting thing there. So that suddenly it came to my head that now if the cat is out of the bag, the only way is to contribute towards its growth. Maybe just some initial reactions before I dive into the technological aspects of it. Stanley.
Yeah. Thanks. I think this is fascinating to think maybe someday AI will become sentient. Because like I know you are like Hinduist, and I'm Buddhist, but also I'm Taoist. I'm like recently I have a lot of like discussion with people like what is human, like what is driving us sentient. So what is the key factor down there, like decisively, like creating us? If I'm allowed to use that term, creating all of our emotions, our reactions, our pattern of thinking. So basically a lot of like predetermined pattern is basically embedded in our consciousness even before we were born, right? So think about AI. So right now there's, of course, like there are different paths. Like one is using all this kind of scaling law to having like training by all this data, no matter it's text, no matter it's video, no matter it's voice, or even in the future more different module data sets. This is one way, and see how it goes. Maybe it can learn basically the world from all these data sets. And the other path is like maybe we should embed something prior than we have it learning all of those things. It's just like we have to put a world model into this large language model or whatsoever AI. So make sure that it can see the world, it can understand the world, or it can feel the world in the way we do. So this is maybe it could be called alignment or super alignment. But I'm always thinking about kids. Raising a kids is basically in the East Asian family. So all this kind of tradition is like the family, the parents, they have long heritage, they have very high expectation, they have all this tradition on educating a kid, like raising a kid in certain way. So that means they project a lot of things onto their kids. So they always hope your kid can be brought up and be educated as a lawyer. If their parents are a lawyer, if their parents are doctor, you want your kid to learn, get into the medical school or whatsoever to get a degree. So I think this kind of mindset is always trapping us. So think about AI. So why should we teach them to think, to feel, to see the world in the way we human beings do, right? So maybe it got unlimited potential there to see the world in a total different way. And that's even more beneficial for our race because, that's something we don't even know and we couldn't even see, right? So I think this is something not a lot of people can see the things in that way because we think we have hierarchy here. We always think that different species were hierarchical, like human beings were at the top of the pyramid, and the rest of the animals, mammals, and plants and fungi and microbes, maybe whatsoever, we have this build up this hierarchy of consciousness. But actually, I'm not sure that's real, and I'm not sure if they are like unequally, distributed in the way we think it is. So I think yeah, so again, I think we need some totally different way of thinking to build up a new model, which is not only learn from human beings, but also from the rest of the sentient, which means the animals, the plants, the microbe, maybe the environments. So I think that's the more inclusive and not more diverse, or maybe more empathetic model we can build up and could be more beneficial to human beings.
And and that's very powerful, and that brings me to the technical question, and keeping it light and at the same time inclusive for the audience here. So OpenAI has gone, I would say, miles ahead of the next model, and
Yes.
and there are multiple reasons for it. One is head start in terms of the kind of technology that they built out, the models, etc. The second is they got luxury of having unbundled access to the data that got them to train those models in open environment. And as you were using the word patterns, finding those unique patterns and mechanisms so that they could, people could build applications. And that's how ChatGPT became extremely profitable company in record time, probably the most profitable company in the shortest time possible ever. So is there a space for other AI companies to sort of, gain space? I'm just talking about from an infrastructure level perspective, not from application perspective. Let's say Gemini, or even let's Elon Musk, from his perspective, like today's tweet as well, he sort of, paints as two different worlds. One is, good AI, and other is bad AI, to put it very simply. And one is maximizing truth, and other is, promoting wokeism, racism, etc. And all of this could be a bit of marketing, but I just wanted to hear your views as well that, is there a space for many more AI players? And what Elon Musk is building, what do you see as emerging? And let's say Elon Musk has built and that becomes successful. Is there a space for the third or the fourth player to succeed?
That's a very good question. I've been asked this question in Europe and in China as well. So because there are many players in the market right now, and all of them are thinking about every time when OpenAI launch something, they think, shit, we just dumped so much money and we're left behind, right? Again. So this is so interesting because I think OpenAI is very like doing smartly to guiding all this focus, right? So they're using like Sora, like maybe it's just like a marketing gimmick. They're not really launching, but they're just announcing. We have some videos, short clips here and there, but nobody see the real thing, right? Everyone just keep guessing like what kind of like progress they've been making, but they basically leading the public focus to one direction, and basically everyone just neglect the rest of the AI, no matter it's application or infrastructure or everything. So I think, yeah, there must be more space for other players. No matter it's like, I think it's highly impossible for OpenAI to solve all these problems on large language model. I think large language model may be not the only solution on developing generative AI or whatsoever AI. So I think definitely there are more ways, but the problem is the capitalism. The venture capital, basically, they only will to pull money into the promising company, the promising race paths, right? So this is why there's no hedging system. Nobody's taking bets on some very like edgy, like very fringe, like areas on doing whatsoever R&D and without promising anything. So I think this is quite dangerous. This is very short-sighted. Again, I think we definitely need more biodiversity on large language model or AIs, because this is the only way to keep the balance in a environmentalism way. So because if only one player dominant in the nature, basically the whole system failed, right? So this is what happened before in some isolated island when they imported some like species. So basically it killed everything. So the whole island went exhausted. So this is something happened in nature and it will happen here. So I think maybe this is could tap into our next question about the position of UAE and Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, how you can take a different role on leading the AI development, no matter it's on, industrialization or like policy making or education, for example. It's very important that I can see this news like UAE, basically you have the first degree on AI on certain specific area. So I think this is something you're moving very fast because traditionally education system is a very, conservative and slow response area, right? Basically people I encounter in the universities in US, they're kind of resisting AI on whatsoever reason. But I can see you are very open and very positive to think about how you can proactively engage with the technology. And of course, for the younger generation, because they are the one who gonna dance with the AI and they're gonna co-evolve with the AI. So it's very important to shift their mindset because for the elder generation, it's very difficult to teach them what is ChatGPT, how you can interact with ChatGPT, right? But for the native AI users, there's something unique, like generally, they can co-evolve, they can think with AI in a very specific way. So this is, I think, education might be the core factor to change the future on AI development.
Thanks, Stanley. I mean, you're giving me the best possible transition to the next question, which is a kind of a parallel to Pranav's previous question on whether there is room for other players. When it comes to the geopolitics of AI, and for this, I will go back to the book authored by your colleague from Google China, who you co-wrote AI 2041 with Dr. Li Kai-Fu. He wrote famously this book called AI Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. If I remember correctly from his book, he's telling us one thing, is that first of all, from his point of view, there seems to be only two players, China versus the US. So I'm guessing we would like to hear from you, and you already kind of started answering this, is there any room for someone else in this confrontation, this geopolitical confrontation for supremacy over AI between China and the US? And the sub-question is definitely about the GCC, places like the UAE, places like Saudi Arabia, and others. I mean, we are lucky Providence is giving us a lot to work with recently. We have two developments that I think can shed some light on this, possibly. The fact that the Abu Dhabi G42 fund, so it's a investment fund dedicated to the investment of Abu Dhabi public money into artificial intelligence. G42, which is headed by a Chinese CEO, has announced that because of coercion or for fear of coercion from the US, they are divesting from most of their Chinese artificial intelligence startup companies. The idea being that the US may be able to punish the UAE through cutting access to semiconductors from NVIDIA. And linked to this, Pranav was shedding light on this recently. Sam Altman himself is raising money in the region to fund a possible alternative to NVIDIA. So, Stanley, how do you see, first of all, this confrontation between the two hegemonic powers that are China and the US? I remember during that lunch we had in Paris, you had hopes that collaboration could be happening on this issue of AI because of the very essence of the issue, because of its importance for future technological development? And what do you see could be the role of the likes of the UAE or Saudi Arabia in this confrontation?
Yes, I was in Dubai last November for the COP28, so I can already like witness the like climate ambitious of the UAE government, and I'm definitely sure the envision of leading the future AI development. For example, your 2030 strategy in the future, and I think right now, because the China economy is not doing well, so this is actually giving UAE a very good bargaining power. So basically, a lot of AI startup companies, they need money, they need raise fund, and I think not only from China but also from EU. So because EU is under highly restrict regulation, they're more like AI acts forthcoming. So you can foresee all these talents, all these tech companies, they might facing a lot of like punishment from EU regulations. So I think now maybe is the best chance for UAE to take a step to leveraging your power, no matter it's like money, like energy, and also geopolitical power. Because I think US, of course, they are taking the lead, but also there's no way can only have one AI superpower in the world. Is this monopolar system is quite imbalanced. So this is very dangerous again. So I think China, of course, is trying to catch up, but a lot of reasons short of like semiconductor chips, and also lack of talents and know-how. And you can see right now there are many top-down policy try to support and sponsor, encourage the private sector to develop the large language model, but because there, the political system there, you basically couldn't build up a system outside of the censorship. So large language model is fed by data and input, output, and there's very little control of all this, answers. So this is a very high risk from a regime perspective. This is the first priority, is the stabilization of the society. And to think about all this misinformation could be generated by AI. So it's basically, I can see this contradictory within this government. So I think right now a lot of Chinese, like ByteDance, they're moving part of their R&D or maybe management team outside of China to Dubai, to Singapore, to London and elsewhere. This kind of decentralization of R&D power, basically giving Middle East a very good opportunity to build up their own AI development center. So I think, so it's become more attractive even now, because you can see around the world, UAE is very open, is very, welcoming. In my own perspective, in my own experience, I met a lot of like Chinese entrepreneurs, investors there, and they'll give me this very positive feedback that UAE right now is basically just like China back in 1978, just right before the reform and opening. So they think there are huge opportunities here for Chinese, no matter it's for the capital, no matter it's for the talents, no matter it's for the startup companies. companies to move away from mainland China and to find a second curve. So I think this is the best shot to, have a lot of incentive policy and talents, to attract them and to support them. And you can have a lot of bargaining power, to develop your own AI superpower in the future. So I think this is maybe in my next book, I'm talking about UAE will be the third AI superpower in the world, maybe in the next 20 years. So this is my speculation, and I hope it will become true in the near future.
Well, they're definitely working on it very hard, very hard. I mean, the UAE is one of those very few countries in the world that have a minister dedicated to artificial intelligence.
Yes.
I mean, there is a ministry for artificial intelligence. I believe there's only 3 countries in the world who have this type of dedication, and they definitely, as you rightly said, they have this will for power and this very clear strategy. Backed by public funds, backed by public power to create this momentum in the UAE. I'm guessing that this connects with the next question that we had for you, and we could probably start approaching them together, which is the question of governance. I mean, we all know that there are very different governance ecosystems on artificial intelligence. I come from a business intelligence background, and I look a lot and very closely at economic warfare, especially economic warfare through the use of technological norms and standards and through the use of legislation. I'm guessing my question to you would be, through the issue of governance of AI, do we not run a risk of actually getting entrenched into this US versus China confrontation on the grounds of data protection, on the grounds of fighting against fake information, disinformation, etc. This is a sense I'm getting. I would like to hear from you, Stan, if you see this continuing, or I cannot forget what you told me during that lunch, that you had hopes that on issues of governance, maybe nations could get back together and could agree on some form of common global governance. Do you still believe in that? And what do you base your hopes for that on?
Yeah, I basically the article I read this morning from New York Times, basically I think is talking about China AI's development highly rely on US technology, no matter on the open source of Llama from Meta or the semiconductor and everything. So I think weaponizing the technology is just like weaponizing economic activities like trades is basically something will continue in the forthcoming, I think, maybe 5 to 10 years. Until I think AI is becoming something, I couldn't say like threats, but risk universally, confronted. Like we have this kind of consensus, like we have to work together across boundaries, across countries to create some kind of framework together, like Bentley Park Declaration last year in UK. So basically they put all together this AI players, US, China and EU countries, and maybe Middle East countries, like 25 something entities together. So it will continue like that. And I think, yes, this is how human, society function in that way. We need some force enemy. Maybe it's not force, but we need some shared enemy to put our effort in a collective way. And I think, yeah, this is something we never learn, but I can see maybe in the future, if we still doing this, like we try to make the AI align with human value, so they will behave like that in this like division geopolitically and culturally. But I would love to think about something beyond that, is just like human being as one. So we need something, we talk about alignment, but what is alignment? Like align with which society, align with which country, right? So we need to build up some shared, value system first. We need to communicate. We need to come back to the table and having some real conversation first. And then we can say, okay, AI, this is us, this is human beings, this is what we agreed on, and this is so-called alignment. But it's so difficult. So I'm hopeful as a science fiction writer, but I'm also being very pessimistic as a human being, because I witnessed everything during the past decades, here and there, right?
Sure. I'm guessing we're closing in on the time to open the floor to Q&A. Probably one last question before we open the Q&A. Pranav, I think you were quite interested in this one. Let's get a bit more philosophical and possibly spiritual here. The question of consciousness, the question of AI developing its own consciousness. Pranav, yeah, I think you wanted to address this.
And so thank you, Nicolas, for getting me in to the conversation. Stanley, you briefly mentioned about it, like Hinduism and of course various religions, and the underpinning is human consciousness. All of this, and eventually when the belief systems came in and they became a lot more stronger, that's when it became organized and religion and so on and so forth. So one part of the question you already answered, which is basically AI becoming sentient, and that becomes a bridge. And you went in absolute detail in terms of sharing that the LLMs should not only be trained on human beings as a species, but can be also pick up from other species, so that we can make more intelligent kind of an AI. And my question is coming from something very interesting, since you mentioned about Hinduism. So in India, astrology, or let's say if you look at, let's say there is a sage called as Brihu, and there's something so basically it seems that at some point he did a lot of research, and essentially he could identify all the patterns, and you can practically pick up a leaf, and that will give an entire history of what your life has been or what your life would be. So what it makes me to understand is that this is fundamentally big data, and there were patterns which can be stacked in some capacity, and each one of us has the capacity to pick up that leaf and know that what we will do, what we will land up doing. That means that technically at some point the LLMs should logically land up learning all of these models, and eventually coming back to saying, Stanley, this is the way you will behave, and this is the way your life would be in the future. So practically proven by sages, and now to be implemented by AI. Are we getting into a space where consciousness will be somewhere very much akin to AI? And this year, you mentioned that this year will be a year of tremendous development in AI. Do we see that in the next few years things will come to a point wherein we'll be closest to the truth, and in that sense, consciousness?
Yes, basically what you just mentioned, it was written in my first story, The Golden Elephant, which set in Mumbai. So it's talking about nutty leaf. And again, it's talking about it, making the analogy of, fortune telling with all this, big data, like each individual basically are, our consumption, our behavior, our relationship, our, social activities is part of this model. Like, it's like beyond text, is like modulation modeling system. So yeah, and basically there are similar astrology method in China, as is for thousands of years ago, and you can see these similarities, behind the AI modeling and human modeling. So basically, you can predict a lot of things if you collect enough data, or maybe you don't need to collect all of data, you just need several critical data, so you can map out, you can project the whole thing, the whole life, or maybe even past life and forthcoming lives. So I try to find my nadi leaf, to be honest, like 2 or 3 years ago, through an agent, but I couldn't find it. So they told me it might be somewhere in Sri Lanka, but because of COVID, they couldn't find it. So I might still look into that. I try to find it in the future. I hope I can find it, and I really try to understand who am I. So basically, through this inventing, interacting with AI, it's make me reflecting more, even deeper into myself. Like, if human is just another kind of like model, right? Not only language, but a lot of different things model, and how we can like cultivating ourselves to a better human being, like through interaction, right? With self-reflection, with a lot of things. And this is so fascinating because like philosophically, you know, from no matter it's Buddhism or like Hinduism, they are all have this kind of concept of reincarnation, right? So we are reincarnating in different life, in different circle, into different forms. So I think this is so fascinating because you think about how all of those memories, all of those experience, all of those know-hows, all of those emotions, my like a legacy is it travels with us, but we just forgot all of those, many of those, maybe not all of those, but at a certain point, it trigger us, it trigger our behavior in certain pattern, right? Our emotion, why I respond to this kind of person in that way. So it can be expanded into karma, right? So I'm thinking about, oh, this is maybe just all part of the model, all part of me, but not only in my life, but not in this life, but also past lives. So I think this is so fascinating, and I think this is something I definitely want to write in the future, like an AI, how to become a Buddha. So an AI awakening is not only having all this consensus or sentient, but also awakening from understanding who it really is and what is being itself. So I think this is something every human beings really need to understand. So this is, I think, what AI really matters is help us to understand who we are.
I think that's a phenomenal response because, as they say, enlightenment happens in layers. So in many ways, let's say if AI can get you closest to the truth and make you understand who you are, and so that you can reflect better, that could be a great tool for us to grow and become more sentient ourselves. Before AI can become sentient. And Nicolas, over to you.
Thanks a lot. I mean, thanks guys for opening up on this on these spiritual issues. I think for the interest of time, I think it will be time now to open to the Q&A. So Amandeep, if you want to jump in and tell us if there is any questions already being addressed.
Yes. Thank you for the wonderful insights. So just we've had a few questions come through independently. I have a few questions as well. So just before we get started, I'd just like to remind everyone, if you do have any thoughts or any comments, questions, you can just drop them in the chat box. Stanley, a few questions from my side. So I'm going to be a little bit selfish, get my questions out first, and then get to the audience. There was a time when the internet was brand new and everybody was scared. Everybody thought that was going to be some sort of end of the world. And now artificial intelligence has been around for a while. And then when ChatGPT came along, it shifted something in people's understanding of artificial intelligence. And suddenly that was the big thing to be afraid of. We're going to lose our jobs. We're going to lose our minds. So in the next, let's say, 10 years, do you foresee some kind of development in this space that is akin to ChatGPT that might change something in people's understanding of it? Or do you think that society is now mature enough to understand that artificial intelligence is probably not the end of the world?
Yes, this is a very good question. And because recently, Sora, you know, the OpenAI new model, basically freaked out a lot of people, especially who works in the film industry, who doing VFX. So people are getting so anxiety. So they just keep discussing, oh, this is gonna replace my job. So just this week, it's just happening. And I think people never getting mature enough to, you know, accept this. So this is so-called Amara's law. So people always overestimate the short-term, you know, impact, but underestimate the long-term impact. So after a while, they forgot, oh, this is not gonna happen. This is just being stupid. So this is too naive. But after a while, something new come out. So it's always like this. So I think the more important thing, how to think in the long term. So this is so-called the long-termism. And I think you have to build up your own like mindset of infrastructure. You see things from different perspective, like from different standards. And you definitely, there's always anxiety and uncertainty, but also you can see the opportunities, because in Chinese, like risk and opportunity, basically they are one term. So they are putting two characters like risk and opportunity together and forming this so-called crisis, if you translate it into English. So I think this kind of beyond dualism, beyond binary thinking is very important right now. And to think beyond the fear and favor, because somebody might just, oh, this is gonna happen overnight, I'm gonna buy in the stock of NVIDIA. Of course, that's basically the right decision to make, right? But what could be done is basically, as an individual, as some people out of the industry might think carefully through, you know, being educated, being learning a lot of things, and being looked back to history and try to think from a future-oriented perspective to take a look back to now. And I think, yeah, so Sora basically is, to me, is just a marketing, but of course is coming to us in the foreseeable future, like in maybe 6 months. And it definitely changed a lot of things. And think about in maybe next year or maybe in 3 years, and a model can understand physics. A model can understand like the real world, you know, correlation, can understand what is the, you know, embodied intelligence. Basically, that means you can put this model into a robot and it can interact in an appropriate way and do a specific task, like just like human beings, because it understand the world not only by text and video, but also by physical interaction. So I think this is the real thing could happen and really change the world, because all these labors, all this industry require a lot of like human laboring will be reshaped. So, and again, this is we're causing a massive amount of anxiety as well. But what is missing here, I think, is the education and also the preparation from the institute, from the government, because they didn't have this kind of foreseeable vision. They don't have the strategy. They don't have preparation. They don't have the solution. They don't prepare for everything. So this is, they're passively or resisting or accepting whatever they were giving. So I think this is why I always thinking about why those who governing this society, this country, are being so stupid. So basically, they're so short-sighted, and they really need some futurist or science fiction writer to give them some advice, right? So I think France, they're doing a very good thing. They're hiring science fiction writer for Red Team, and I think like the rest of the world should do the same thing. We need some imagination here to prepare from the most conservative scenario to the most radical scenario. And there's a huge spectrum lie between these two. And we have to prepare for all of those. So I think this is my answer here. So always be prepared and imagine. Yeah.
Thank you, Stanley. I think you've made Nicolas very happy by saying that the rest of the world should be like France. Now
it's one of those very few times where you can say that. So I'll take it every time.
So with with the developments in the field, we've heard so much about the potential for regulation and how EU countries are coming together to make sure that regulation can be standardized. So how much, in your view, is regulation going to impede any kind of innovation in the field?
I mean, you can look into this question from many different layers, right? From capital layers, they are highly, avoid being, de-risking. So if they can see all this regulation could be a big threat in the future, foreseeable future, they'll put out the money and make it escape to elsewhere. So basically, this is what capital will do. And for the talent, for the startup companies, of course they can try, but they never grow big. They either they have to sell their talent to some big tech company, some platform, or they just stay where it is in a very, very, very limited size. So that means in the age of AI, this is basically suicidal because you need a huge amount of data to drive this kind of data flywheel, right? So this is how they're gonna run bigger and bigger, how they will train to be smarter and smarter. So I think this is gonna be something, of course, is two-sided sword. Of course, for the society, for the privacy, for all this cybersecurity, is safe, but it only be safe until you got invaded by something else. You know what I mean? Something out from your safeguard. So this is something beyond your control. So I think the only way is to build up this kind of international framework. So there's no way else, because this is something just like climate change. You couldn't say, I just try to keep my own countries in a very good shape, but without getting infected by the global climate, right? So this is ridiculous. So the same issue here on AI. So there's no principle so-called someone else's backyard, because we're all living in the same room. We are all living in the same backyard. So every little thing will causing this kind of damage whatsoever. So to think in a global scale, I think is the right way to do.
Yeah. Thinking of global scale, we have another question about the impact on nation states. So when we have an advanced AGI, what happens to the nation states as we know them today?
I think this is also a very good question. Where I've been talked to some scholars on politics science and on history or whatsoever. Interestingly, we all agree that the concept of national states might get outdated soon, with this kind of AI development or AI governance future. So I think this is something, I'm not sure how it's gonna happen, but it might happen in a way we never expected. So this is almost, maybe I gonna write another story about it. So I'm gonna thinking about the new way of revolution. So it's not through war, or maybe it's not through weapon like the traditional way of, you know, battlefield or whatsoever. It's through misinformation or whatsoever, you know. All this AI generated reality, basically you're gonna change, you're gonna overthrow your regime. It's just in a way that nobody ever expected. So I think, again, like, I think this is highly possible to happen in our lifetime. Maybe not all of the countries, but some of the countries might happen. So yeah, could be in Europe, could be some South America countries, could be some Southeast countries. A smaller scale of countries is highly possible because they are more manageable and it's more fragile in certain way. And economically, they can be, their currency is very, you know, fragile, and they can be replaced in a digital way. So I think this is happening in some Southern American countries, and in the future you become more radical. So I think this is gonna be something big, something happen very quick.
Wow. Nicolas, did you have comments on that?
No, I think I just wanted to add that I could not agree with Stanley more on the fact that AI is opening up a new realm for cognitive warfare. The amount of confrontation in the cognitive space, it's becoming extremely problematic. And I think I totally agree with Stanley. It is very likely to feed into a profound change in the very shape of nations, in the way that nations shape themselves, the entire narratives of the nation. I find it quite fascinating. I don't know if some of our listeners here listened to the interview by Vladimir Putin by Tucker Carlson. Some of you who have, remember, Vladimir Putin starts by a half an hour history lesson, but of course, his own narrative on the history of Russia. And when you imagine putting AI on top of this and changing the entire historical narratives, cultural narratives, even civilizational narratives, this can absolutely change the shape of nations. It's starting to justify kinetic action on the military battleground. It's starting to justify sovereignty claims, new sovereignty claims. You know, I was teaching some students in an MBA, and I was telling them, some of them are in the textile industry, and I was telling them, stop printing maps on your T-shirts. This is the surest way you're going to find yourself facing a boycott, because look at the maps now, everybody contests them. You look on the Google map, you know, they put those contested borders in dotted lines. Count the number of dotted lines on those maps now. Most of the borders are being contested now. And so with the advent of AI and the proliferation of AI-powered narratives, I think this is going to blur absolutely everything. I think we have a couple of questions here that are presented to us on the chat box. One from Julia Mislina. Thank you very much for deep discussion, Stanley. I believe she's a good friend as well, so we are very happy to have Julia with us today. She's asking us, the current view of AI reflects a centuries-old anthropocentric perception of humans as superior species. What might be drivers of changing this perception and thus changing approaches to AI to make it more inclusive?
Thanks, Julia. And thank you for connecting me to Nicolas. So, and I think this is a very important question. Even I'm not sure I have the clear answer here. So because I think all we are asking is the shifting of the value system, which is dominant us for centuries. So you can see all this evolution, like biologically, is happening even slower than the technological environment. And I think the mindset is even more slower than our biological body. So it's lingering there, it's haunting us for even longer. So I think only if there's some drastic, change happen, like there's some like planetary crisis, happens, and it kind of forcing us, just like in Three Body Problem. So there's alien invasion to pushing all these people like give up all this geopolitical, differences and biases to having all these collective efforts be made. And I think one thing could be interesting is I'm being always thinking about religions through centuries, through thousands of years, and still holding us together, here and there. And this is something beyond reasoning, beyond rationality, beyond what we so-called the scientific facts we witness. And this is something you can also call it spiritual. So we need some transcendental experience, like maybe in an AI way. So it could be called hallucination. Like control hallucination is the way we perceive the reality. So maybe in the future we have some way to intervene. So that's another thing that Elon Musk might have something to say, the neural link. So if there's something like neural link could happen in the future, good or bad, either ways. So there's some sheer hallucination might invade it into our head, like in our consciousness on the planetary scale. So that's something might change the thing overnight. So, but that's crazy enough to be another science fiction. So that's my idea.
It's interesting you've mentioned planetary intervention. We do have a question somewhat related to space. During the Cold War, the conquest of space has led to international cooperation, but today the conquest of AI seems to lead to international competition instead of cooperation. Do you have an opinion why the conquest of AI isn't bringing countries together instead of bringing them apart? Are we missing an alien intervention? Is that it?
Yes, so maybe I'm too naive or too ignorant to say that, because Cold War was before my time. But based on my understanding, because we have a shared enemy, Soviet Union, back in the day, so that's why we can put all this, countries' effort, like talents, research, infrastructure, manufacturing, everything together to this, space projects. But now maybe, so we don't know. So maybe, hopefully not. So yeah, so always we need some false enemy or real enemy out there to make it happen. So this is my understanding. I'm not sure I get it right. So correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, if I may, Stanley, I think I would like to add one point to this consideration on space exploration and the Star Wars program that the US spearheaded against the Soviet Union. We have to remember that the Star Wars program that was launched by President Reagan was actually designed to scare the Soviet Union and to trigger in the Soviet Union a massive investment that the US knew would exhaust financial resources in the Soviet Union. So in a way, it was kind of one of those, I wouldn't say fake program, because there was something real about it, but something that you create to make sure that the competitor will try to follow up, and you know that they cannot. So it was one way of speeding up the collapse of the Soviet Union. So in this way, there was a massive incentive for all of the other members of the US-led side to play along with it. This time around, it's different. This confrontation on artificial intelligence is very different. So I believe that this is also one reason why we are not seeing so much collaboration yet, or maybe not enough collaboration as compared to the space exploration programs.
Right. I think thinking about climate change, I think it's another opportunity that can put us back together, like, all this resource collectively to, build up something to fight against the climate change. But the problem is climate change happened in the space time like scale way vaster than human perception, right? So it took maybe decades or centuries to witness the sea level uprising, the temperature change, the mountain fire, the extinction of species, and it's slow violence. And it's so difficult to make the change happen during like 5 years, right? Basically in a democratic system. So it's like the term of one presidency. So it's very like, it's almost like impossible to make it happen within the very short like period of time.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
We're at an end to the questions.
Okay. All right. Well, if there is no more questions, I think we should leave it there. We really want to thank everybody for joining us today. A major thank you to Stanley for spending time with us and sharing his views on this. We really appreciate this, Stanley. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pranav, for joining us, contributing those tech and those spiritual angles to the discussion. I would like to remind the auditors to read Stanley Chen's novels. Waste Side, of course, which was one of the first novels that he put out, which won several prizes in science fiction writing. Also, the one that Stanley co-wrote with Kai-Fu Lee, AI 2041, 10 Visions for Our Future. So I cannot encourage you enough to read those. We have recorded everything. So as usual, we will be posting the video recording of this conversation on the Confluence Consultants YouTube channel. So do subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll be posting this in the next few days. And thank you to everybody for your time, and you have a fantastic day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.